Hi everyone, today we are going to talk about Git submodules. Git submodules allow us to have references within our project to other repositories without having to clone the information into our repositories and then save a copy of that information. Additionally, Git submodules allow us to pull from those individual repositories as changes are made, and we can also make changes to those repositories if we have the ability to contribute back to those projects. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate three separate projects. We're going to have our main sample project, which would be our primary project. And then within that project, we will create two separate submodule projects, and we will add them as Git submodules. And I'll show you how to kind of work with those, how to make changes, and how to update those modules. So to begin, what we're going to do is we're going to initialize the three projects that we have. So as you can see over here, I'm using GitLab for this sample. This information will work with GitHub as well. The information should be transparent between all three projects. So if we take a look at these projects here, we can see that we have an empty project for all three. Okay, so this one's empty as well as this one. So we'll go ahead and we'll initialize these projects. So on the screen here, I have a bunch of commands. They're very standard Git commands. So you can see I make the directory and then I initialize it, I add the remote, and then just add a couple of changes and then push that information up. So for the first one, our main project, relatively simple project, and not much in this other than the README file. So if we take a look at the next project, we can see very much the same thing, just another very simple project with just a README file. And then finally, our third project, we are going to actually talk about how to use submodules to check out branches. So down here, we can see we will initialize this project with a branch attached to it and some changes within that branch. Okay, and so if we take a look at our sample project here, we can see at this point, we just have the README file. And if we refresh our submodules, we also only have our README file, with this one also having an additional branch as well called bug fix. So let's go ahead and begin. So our first action here will be to add an existing project to our primary repository here. So we will go ahead and we'll switch into the sample projects folder here. And if we take a look before we begin, you can see the only thing that exists at this moment is the Git repository as well as the README file. So when we want to add a submodule or a reference to a submodule, we use the git add command, the git submodule add command, followed by the name of the repository, and then any additional options that we want to specify. So in this case, we'll just use the defaults, which will, when it adds it, it'll clone the submodule and it'll reference the master repository, sorry, the master branch for that repository. So if we take a look inside here, we can see that it went out, it cloned the repository into our folder, and we can see now that we have the new submodule. If we take a look at all the files within our folder now, we also will have a new file called Git Modules. This Git Modules file keeps track of all of our submodules, including some information about what those submodules will be checked out as. So we can see here we have our stanza, which gives just a name, so we can set this to whatever we like. Usually it's named right after the repository. The path will outline where it's going to create the path. So you can see here it says my submodule 1. That's going to be the name of the folder that it creates when that repository is initialized. And then finally down here we have the URL to the repository that this references. So when this gets cloned or any changes go to that, it knows where to look for that information. Now, if we take a look at the git status command, what we will notice is there's two new files added to the committed. So they've been staged, they haven't yet been committed to the repository. And this is done automatically by the git submodule add command. So at this point, if we're ready to continue, we can go ahead and commit those to our repositories. However, before we do that, let's head into the submodule folder. And I just want to show you that if you run git status from within the submodule, it is going to be working on its own repository at that point. So when you go into each of these submodules, they are their own repositories, and the containing folder will also have its own repository as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and commit this, and we'll push this up to our remote repository. All right, so now if we take a look at our main project here, if we refresh the page, what we'll notice is that submodules will actually show up in our remote repository by their name and the hash of the last commit that was checked in to this repository. So in this case, this is the hash that was committed to here. If we click this, however, what you'll notice is that it actually switches projects. It goes over to the other project and allows you to see the details for that. So this is just a reference to that project, and it doesn't actually store this project's information or files within your own repository. So it gives it a nice clean way of having references or dependencies to other projects without making copies of those locally on your own system outside of actually cloning them and using them as normal. Okay. So our next option will be to add another submodule, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to add the submodule and check it out at a specific branch within that submodule. So when we created the submodule 2, we created an additional branch called bug fix. So we're going to initialize this submodule, and when we clone it, we're also going to tell it to automatically check out that bug fix for us. So same command, git submodule, -b for the branch, the name of the branch that you want to check out, and then followed by the repository URL. If you wanted to check it out to a different folder name, you could specify the folder at the end as well. So I'll go ahead and we'll run this command. Once again, it clones the repository into our directory, and if we take a look now, we now have the second repository with the README. Now, if we take a look at the Git modules at this point, we'll see now that we have two different submodules, and here's our second module, and down here we have a new option for the branch that specifies what branch we want to check out. So in this case, bug fix. So if we take a quick peek into this submodule and run our git status command, you can see now that it's checked out on the bug fix branch. So if we had any changes in here that we wanted to use specifically, then it would automatically be checked out at this particular time. Okay, so once again, if we run our status command, we'll see that the files were staged. They're not yet committed, so we can go ahead and commit those. One thing to keep in mind is the Git modules file is only for keeping track of your modules that are submodules for this project. The actual commit marker for the project, however, is based on the folder. So in this particular case, you can see here we have the my submodule 2. When we check that in, we're actually stamping it as that particular point in its commit tree. Okay, so let's go ahead and commit them as I mentioned, and then we'll go ahead and we'll push those up to our remote repository. And if we head back to our project again and refresh it, you can now see we have both submodules. And once again, if we click it, it takes us back into that submodule. It doesn't automatically check out the branch if you click the name. However, if you click on the hash for the commit, it will take you to that specific hash. And in this case, this hash actually references the bug fix branch. However, it doesn't have to. So if you applied changes and you've committed them to that branch, and then you've not maybe merged that branch or created a new branch off of that, and your commit is ahead of the branch being created, then that can also be checked out as well. Okay. All right. So now that we've gone ahead and set up our project with the submodules, what we're going to do is we're going to delete the project on our local repository here, and then we're going to use the clone option to show what happens in the various ways that you can actually clone with submodules. So I will go ahead and remove the project directory, and we'll go ahead and we'll run the standard git clone command followed by the project repository URL, and then we'll call it sample projects. So when we run this command, one thing to pay attention to here is that it clones that project only, and you don't see anything else about any of the other projects or any of the other submodules rather. So if we go into the directory and we take a look at the files, what we'll notice is the submodule folders will exist, but there's nothing in those modules. So if you don't specify any additional options for the clone, the git clone, it will not by default pull down the repositories. And this is done purposely to allow you to clone your repository and then selectively clone your individual submodules if you desire. So for example, if you're working on a project and you want to make changes to one of the submodules, or you want to test something with only one of the submodules, there's no need to clone the whole entire repository, including all of its submodules. You can clone a subset of them as needed. Now, if you accidentally ran the git clone command without any of the recursive options and you need it to have all those modules recursively updated or cloned, what you can do at that point is you can run the git submodule update sub command followed by the init keyword. So the init will tells Git to go out and fetch the repositories for your submodule. So if we go ahead and we execute this now, what we can see here is that it reached out and it has cloned all those submodules for us. And if we take a look at the files now, you can now see that the files have been loaded. And if we take a look at the status at this point, nothing's changed, so our status should be showing as clean, and we are now checked out on the master branch. Okay, so if you need to clone the repository and get all that done in one single command, what you can actually do is you can use the -- recursive flag. So we'll go ahead and we'll delete the project here, and then I'll demonstrate this. So this flag here instructs the git clone to also go out and recursively clone all the submodules that are part of this project. So instead of going into the project and using the update -- init option for submodule, you can do this all in a single command with the recursive option. So you can see here, there's the output's a lot more verbose, and you can see it's actually gone out and cloned all the individual submodules within this project. So we take a look in the project folder here, you can see everything has been cloned, just like it was when we did the manual update with the init options. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start making changes to our projects, and we're going to start off by making changes to the main project. Now, if you have submodules within your main project, you can make changes to your main project without impacting or changing anything within the submodules themselves. So in the demonstration here, what I'm going to do is just add a quick message to the README file. I'm going to go ahead and run the status command. You can see here we only have one file that's changed. It's not yet been staged. It's not mentioning anything about our submodules. So it's status quo for this. You can just go ahead and add and stage your changes. You can commit them, and then you can push them up to your remote repository when you're done with them. Okay. Now, if you want to make changes to the individual submodules, you can do that too, as long as you have the necessary rights to make those changes. So what we'll do in this example is we will make changes to the first submodule, and I want to show one of the caveats that can happen when you clone a repository along with the recursive option. So let's head into the submodule here, and if we take a look at the git status, what you'll notice right away is that even though we didn't specify what branch we wanted to check out, it should have checked out master, but when we take a look at the status here, it's saying that it's in a detached head mode. So this specific hash in this case does refer to the master branch at the current commit that it's at, but it doesn't necessarily have to. So we could be a couple commits ahead than what the original branch was created at. And so this can cause some problems if you're not careful when you try to make changes. So to demonstrate that, what we're going to do is we're not going to change the branch. We're going to just go ahead and make a couple of changes, And we'll see that when we try to commit this, when we try to push this to our remote repository, it's going to complain that we cannot do it, or it's going to show that no changes were made. And in order to save those changes, we actually have to check the information into a branch, and then we can merge that back in and then push it to our repository. So let's start here. We'll go ahead and we'll make a change to the README file. If we take a look at the status now, we can see it's still in the detached head mode, and we've modified the README file. So let's go ahead and add that or stage it, and we'll go ahead and we'll commit that. So you can see at this point, no errors have come up. Everything looks good, and it seems like everything is working just the way it should. However, if we go ahead and we try to push that to our master, what you're going to notice here is there's no error, but it does say everything is up to date. So why is that? Why did it not push that information to the remote repository? Well, the reason for that, again, is because you're in detached head. In order to push anything to a remote repository, it has to be to a specific branch. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to check out a branch. So let's go ahead and assume that we forgot to do the checkout master. We'll try to run that now, and we'll get this error that says, well, we made some changes. Are you sure you want to do this? If you are and you want to save those changes, then you should commit those to a branch, and then we'll let you switch. So by default, it gives you a suggestion. So it tells you to create a new branch, followed by the current commit that's within this head non-branch attached setup. So we can do this. You can pick a different branch name if you want, but we'll just go ahead and stick with the standard here. And when we do that, what's going to happen is it's going to create the new branch, and it's also going to check us out into the master branch. So if we take a look at the branches, first off, we can see now we have two branches. We have the new branch name, which is this one up here. And then you can see we are on the master branch. And we can also check that by running the git status command. And you can see we are on the master branch. So if we take a look at the README file now, because we've made some changes, what you'll notice here is that in the master branch, those changes are not available. So up here you can see the change that we made, and it's not showing up in that master branch. But if we check out the new branch and then cat out that README file, we can see that we did save those changes, and it is now in a branch. So now we could go ahead and we can merge that back into our master branch, which was originally what we wanted to do anyways. So let's go ahead and check out master. We'll run the merge command to merge the branch into the master. So everything looks good there. If we take a look at our README on the master now, you can see that we do have our change. So now we can go ahead and delete the branch. And if we take a look at the status command, we can see that the changes have all been staged, and we're now actually one commit ahead. So we can now go ahead and push this to our remote repository as is to bring that up to date as well. Okay, so, and there we go. So we now have our change, and if we take a look at our main project here, we can see that the README file does have the change. We'll just go ahead and refresh this here. Okay, so saying that we don't have the change. Sorry, that's because I'm in the wrong submodule here. So let's refresh this again. So here we are. So we have now our change in the submodule, which was what we're working on, not on the sample project. And so that change has been applied successfully to that submodule specifically. So to do that, again, we went into the folder, we made the changes, and then we pushed it up to the master. Now, if you're careful, you should be checking your branches automatically whenever you go into a submodule to make the changes. So if we head back out here and go into our other submodule and we do our status, we can see we're in detached head. So before we make any changes, what we'll do is we'll always check to see if a branch has been checked out. If it hasn't, we'll go ahead and check out a branch based on our requirements. So in this case here, I have gone ahead and applied the bug fix to that branch. I've selected that branch. And just to make sure that we're on the right branch, we'll go ahead and do a quick show. and we can see now that we're on the bug fix. So now we'll go ahead and we'll add some changes. So we've just added another input to the README file in this particular submodule. If we take a look at the status, it's still showing that, or it is showing that there's changes now. So we'll go ahead and we'll commit those changes, and we will go ahead and push those up to our remote branch. So because we checked the branch out ahead of time, you can see here that there's no complaints that we're in detached head, and we can check out different modules, different repositories at this particular point. Different branches. So here we go, we're in the master branch, and we can go ahead and check back out into the bug fix branch now. Okay, so now that we've made changes to our submodules, one of the things to keep in mind is the submodules are now ahead of our sample project. So in this instance, our sample project has the right information because we made the changes here, but that's not always going to be the case, especially if we have references to projects that we may not be able to commit to ourselves. So if we take a look at the status here, we can see that these submodules are now showing that they are unstaged because we've made changes to them. So these are showing that there's new commits made to those because it is keeping track of the changes that we've made. So we need to more than likely check these in as well, so that the next time we clone this repository, we will be at the right branch or the right commit level for the changes that we've made. So to do that, once again, we'll just do it just like any other change. We'll go ahead and just do the git add, followed by the names of the two submodules. And then if we take a look at the status, they're now they're now staged. And so we can go ahead and we can commit them. And once again, at this point, when we push this to the remote will now be aware that we're at the latest and greatest version for those submodules. So if we take a look at our project here, so you can see these are the submodules that we had originally, and when we refresh these two numbers will be totally different numbers, indicating that we're at the latest commit level when we did this. And these could obviously change as changes are made to each of the submodules, but in our case, they are at the current version that's available. Okay. All right, so now what we will do is we'll go ahead and make some changes. We'll make the changes on the remote side now, and then I'll show you how you can pull down the changes for each of the individual projects. So for your main project, you can pull information just like you can with anything else, with any other regular project without any submodules. So we'll just add a quick change log here. Okay, and so this will bring our primary project one step ahead. And if we go back to our main project and just do a git pull, you can see here that the file has been pulled down. And if we take a look here, we can see that we have our change log. And within there, we should have the information we just stored in there, same as anything else. And once again, if we take a look at the status, we haven't changed anything locally, so we should be all clean and up to date. Now, if there's changes on the remote, on the submodules, there's a couple of different ways we can go about updating those submodules. So to begin, we can update individual modules separately. So if we know one module has changed, we can ask for just the changes on that submodule. And there's a couple ways of doing that. And then finally, we can actually update all the submodules if we know that we want to get the latest and greatest for all of the submodules all at once. So our first choice here is we're going to show how to do the updates by going into the submodule folder and then pulling the changes just like we would with any regular repository. So to begin, let's head over to our submodule. Let's add in a new change log. Okay, so that brings that submodule one commit ahead. And so we can switch into that module folder here, and we'll go ahead and run our git pull to download all the new changes. So just like a regular repository, you can see here we fast forwarded and we have downloaded our change log. And if we take a look, we can see that we have our data that's within that folder. Now, when we come back to our main project folder. If we run the git status, we've now changed the sub module, and so now it sees that the commit is ahead of what's currently committed to its repository. So we could at this point go ahead and stage that commit and update it, and then finally push it back to our remote repository to make sure that the next time we clone our repository, it's at the right stage of our updates once we've done our tests. Okay, so now the other way to do updates is we can actually use the sub module to ask for remote updates once again on our individual sub module. So over here we can see we're using the sub module command followed by the update sub option, and then we're specifically stating go out to the remote and fetch the changes for this individual sub module. So let's go ahead and once again add a new file into here. We'll switch over to our bug fix branch just to make sure that it's on the right branch, and we'll just create a new changelog file just like we have for all the other changes. Okay, we'll go ahead and commit that. And then so now down here, we can go ahead and execute this command from the main project directory, and it will reach out and it'll pull the new changes for my submodule 2. So you can see that happened here. It fast forwarded the information and downloaded the new changelog file. So if we take a look at our files for submodule 2, we can see that our changelog file is now there. And if we just take a quick peek at that file, it should contain the message that we had added. So once again, no different than the git pull when we were in the submodule 1. Making changes to it does increase the pointer for the commits, and it will see that it needs to be updated. So if everything's good to go and you want to save that, you can go ahead and stage it, commit it, and push it to your push it to your remote repository. Okay. So finally, what you can do if there's a whole bunch of changes or it's been a while and you know that all the changes are good to go, maybe you're working on all the submodules on your own and you want to just pull down all the updates that you've made across all of them, you can use this. You can still use the submodule update command followed by remote and just not specify any particular submodule that you want to update. This will automatically go and fetch the changes for all the submodules and then apply them to your project. So let's go ahead and make another change here. In this case, we will edit the README file. And then we'll do the same thing over here within our submodule 2. We'll make sure again it's in the bug fix. Could be in the master as well, but because we're looking at this one specifically, we'll make the change in here so that we see that. Okay, so we now have 2 changes. So let's go ahead and pull down all those changes. So we'll execute the git submodule update -- remote. And you can see here it went through each of the submodules and fast forwarded them to their current changes. So if we take a look at the sub command, no file changes. However, if we take a look at the README files, we can see there's the new change within each of those files. Okay, and so take a look at the status. We now have 2 submodules that are out of date. So we'll go ahead and we'll stage those and we'll commit them and finally push them to our origin once again. So if we take a look at our repository here for our sample project, you can see now that they are pointing to their most recent updates, and your submodules are now connected directly to your project.